my name is Jack Colburn. I'm 52 years old, a retired master sergeant from the U.S. Army, and I've stood through firefights that rattled the ground beneath my boots. But nothing ever hit me the way my own son's words did that afternoon on the football field. The air smelled like hot grass and cheap cologne, the kind that clings to nervous teenagers dressed for their big day. His graduation should have been one of the proudest moments of my life, but it became the one I can't stop replaying in my head. I wore my old service jacket because it was the best thing I owned. The sun was harsh, picking out every crease, every worn patch on the fabric. Parents around me wore tailored suits, soft dresses, shoes that didn't carry a decade of dust. When my son spotted me from across the crowd, something changed in his face. His smile vanished, replaced by a look I recognized too well, disappointment mixed with shame. He walked over, keeping his distance like my presence alone was contagious. His friends hovered nearby, laughing and snapping pictures with their brand new phones. He glanced at them, then at me, and his voice came out sharp and loud enough for everyone to hear. Maybe if you were better at life instead of war, we wouldn't be poor. It sliced through the noise of the crowd like a round cracking through the air. Heads turned. Someone laughed. I felt the heat rise under my skin, not from the sun, but from the burn of humiliation. I'd been shot at, yelled at, stripped down to nothing but instinct and grit, but this was different. This was my own blood cutting me open. His words didn't just bruise, they carved a hole so deep I could feel the years of sacrifice collapsing into it. I stood there frozen, holding a small envelope with the gift I'd saved for months to buy, and it suddenly felt like a piece of trash. I saw myself through his eyes, not as a soldier, not as the man who raised him alone, but as a loser in a wrinkled uniform standing among people who had everything I couldn't give him. His mother had moved on years ago, married a man with money, a man who wore polished shoes and handed out luxury like party favors. I couldn't compete with that. I didn't even try to anymore. The loudspeaker announced his name, and he walked away without looking back. His friends followed, still laughing, still pointing. I stood in that sea of folding chairs, surrounded by proud families, clutching the envelope like it meant something. My throat was dry, my chest tight, but no tears came. Soldiers don't cry in public. We learn to stand straight, even when everything inside us breaks. I thought about the man I used to be, the man who once believed serving his country meant something more than medals gathering dust. I thought about the years spent away from home, the birthdays missed, the promises made to a little boy who once looked at me like I was his hero. Somewhere along the way, that hero had faded. What stood here now was just a tired man who didn't have enough to give. The cheers of other parents filled the field as graduates tossed their caps in the air. It should have been my moment too, but all I could hear was his voice echoing in my head. Maybe if you were better at life instead of war, we wouldn't be poor. Those words didn't just humiliate me. They stripped away the last bit of armor I had left. I knew then this story wasn't about war anymore. It was about everything I had lost trying to fight the wrong battles. I wasn't always this broken. There was a time when I stood tall, shoulders squared, chest out, wearing my country's uniform with pride. I served 24 years in the U.S. Army, most of them as a combat leader in Afghanistan, where every decision carried weight and every life under my command mattered more than my own. I was a master sergeant, the guy younger soldiers looked up to, the one they came to when things got rough. I taught them how to stay calm under fire, how to lead with strength but never lose their humanity. I earned my stripes not from shouting orders, but from standing beside my men in the worst of it. My last deployment was the hardest. I lost 2 soldiers in a roadside blast, and I still see their faces every night when I close my eyes. But we completed the mission, brought the rest home, and I received an honorable discharge with a ceremony that felt more like a quiet goodbye than a celebration. They gave me a plaque, a handshake, and a pat on the back. Then I was done. Coming home wasn't the relief I expected. Civilians didn't look me in the eye. People thanked me for my service, then walked away like it was just something polite to say before moving on with their day. The battlefield faded fast, but what came after was lonelier than any outpost I'd ever guarded. My wife left 6 months later. Said I was different. Said she couldn't live with the way I flinched at loud noises or how I'd sit up all night staring at the wall like I was still on watch. I couldn't argue. She wasn't wrong. PTSD doesn't show up like a broken leg. It creeps in slow, turns you quiet, makes you forget how to smile. She left me with our son, saying he needed structure and that I was good at that. I tried to be. I made lunches, packed backpacks, and sat through school plays pretending I wasn't dying inside. I didn't know how to explain to a little boy why his dad couldn't hold down a job, or why sometimes he'd find me sitting in the garage with tears I didn't understand. Money got tight. I did everything I could. Security jobs, night shifts at warehouses, driving trucks across state lines until my back gave out. Nothing lasted. Nobody wants to hire a middle-aged vet with a service dog and a resume full of combat. I sold my medals to cover rent one winter. Pawned my old uniform jacket for grocery money. No one tells you that serving your country might one day mean standing in line at a food bank, hoping no one recognizes you from the front page of a newspaper 10 years ago. I used to lead missions. Now I clean motel bathrooms for $10 an hour. The worst part wasn't the work. It was becoming invisible, like the world had moved on without me. Like I'd been useful once, but now I was just background noise in checkout lines and crowded buses. I'd go days without anyone saying my name out loud, but I kept going. For my son, he was the one thing I hadn't completely lost. I thought if I just held on long enough, worked hard enough, I could still be the man he needed. I didn't realize he'd already started seeing me through someone else's lens. Someone richer, someone who hadn't come home broken. I carried all of it in silence. The war, the loss, the quiet collapse of everything I'd built. I didn't want pity. I just wanted someone to remember that I'd mattered once. That I'd fought for something. That I'd bled and sacrificed and believed it would mean something when I came back. Instead, all I got was the sound of a slammed door and a boy who called me a failure in front of the world. It was a Tuesday morning when the knock came. I figured it was another bill collector or maybe someone from the building about the late rent. I wasn't in the mood to explain why the lights were still off at 10 a.m. or why I couldn't come up with $40 for the water shut-off notice. Instead, there was a man in a suit, polished shoes, briefcase in hand. He introduced himself as a government attorney, something about Department of Defense contract law. I almost closed the door on him. Thought it was some scam or worse, some new debt I didn't know about. Then he mentioned my father's name, Frank Colburn, a name I hadn't heard in years. He said my dad wasn't just some failed inventor who died in Vietnam. He was a civilian defense contractor working undercover on seismic mine detection technology. Technology the military classified under national security in the late 1970s. I told him there had to be a mistake. My mom said my father died broke. A dreamer who left us with nothing but debt and a shed full of useless metal. The lawyer handed me a stack of documents stamped with more seals than I could count. The patents had been kept under wraps for 4 decades. Used by the military in war zones from Iraq to Africa, billions of dollars in licensing fees were owed, and my father's estate was entitled to a cut. A big one. The number was so large I had to read it 3 times before it made sense. $312 million. It felt like some twisted joke. I hadn't eaten in 2 days. I couldn't even afford a bus pass. Now someone was telling me my dad had left behind a fortune the government had sat on for 40 years. But it wasn't that simple. There was a condition. The lawyer pulled out an envelope, old, yellowed. My name was written across the front in handwriting I hadn't seen since I was a boy. Inside was a letter from my father, dated 1979. He wrote about the invention, about the guilt he carried for using science for destruction, even if it saved lives. He said he tried to build something better for the world and that someday I would understand why he disappeared. He wanted me to go to his old workshop, not alone. With my son, he wrote that legacy means nothing unless it connects generations. That inheritance is more than money. It's understanding. The letter ended with one line burned into my memory. If you want to know who I was, take your son and walk where I once stood. Then you'll see why I did what I did. I sat there in silence after the lawyer left. The envelope trembled in my hands. My son wouldn't even return my messages. And now I had to ask him to come on some kind of pilgrimage to a place tied to a man we both barely knew. But for the first time in years, I felt something crack open inside me. Not anger, not shame. Hope, faint, uncertain, but real. Maybe this was my chance to make things right, or at least start trying. I called Nathan 3 times. No answer. Texted him a simple message. I need to talk, it's important. He replied 2 days later with one word. Why? I told him it was about his grandfather. About something that couldn't wait. He hit me back with a string of texts I won't repeat, all of them boiling down to one thing. Why would I care about a man I never met and a father who barely shows up? I almost gave up. My pride begged me to. But I sent one more message. The truth, there's money involved. A lot of it, millions. That got his attention. He called 20 minutes later. His voice was sharp, skeptical, and cold. I laid it out plain. Your grandfather's inventions were classified. The patents just got released. There's an inheritance. I need you to come with me to Montana. 1 weekend. That's all. He agreed, but not out of love. He asked how much he'd get. I told him I didn't know. It hurt to bribe my own son with the idea of wealth, but I didn't know another way to reach him. We drove in silence most of the way. He wore wireless earbuds and scrolled his phone while I kept both hands on the wheel. He didn't ask questions. I didn't press. Now and then, I'd glance over. He looked like a stranger in my passenger seat. At a gas station in Wyoming, I watched him take selfies for social media. I used to carry him on my shoulders to air shows. Now he wouldn't even make eye contact. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words stayed lodged in my throat. The gap between us felt like a canyon. I wondered if this trip would change that or just confirm how far gone we were. Still, I kept driving. I held on to one hope. Maybe in that old workshop there was more than just money waiting for us. Maybe there was a chance. A sliver of something lost but not gone. The snow crunched under our boots as we stepped out of the truck. Montana's cold bit through my jacket, sharp and unforgiving. The old military property stretched ahead, fenced in by rusting chain link and topped with coils of dead barbed wire. Faded signs warned of federal trespassing, but no one had guarded this place in decades. The buildings were gutted, metal siding warped by time, and roofs caved under snow weight. Nathan stood with his hands in his pockets, already bored, his breath puffing in the cold air. I led him past the buildings to a mound of frozen dirt half hidden behind a collapsed shed. A steel hatch was buried there, marked by a rusted government insignia. I pulled off my glove, pressed my palm to a dusty scanner sunk in concrete. A light blinked red, then green. A deep, mechanical groan followed as the hatch creaked open. Cold air spilled out from below, tinged with metal and mildew. Nathan raised an eyebrow. I could tell he wasn't expecting anything real. Not this. Not a working vault beneath the ruins. He hesitated at the steps, then followed me down. The bunker swallowed the light. Each step echoed like it hadn't been touched in years. The silence tightened around us. Somewhere behind me, I heard Nathan mutter, "What the hell is this place?" That was the first time he sounded more curious than annoyed. And in that moment, I started to believe the bunker might hold more than just a legacy. It might just hold the beginning of something between us. The vault smelled like old copper and cold stone. Dust floated in the air like it had been holding its breath for years. We found a bench lined with heavy cases and stacks of journals, all labeled with my father's name. At the center sat a sealed crate marked Prototype 1. Next to it, an old monitor flickered to life when I flipped the breaker. My father's face appeared on the screen, older than I remembered, voice steady but full of urgency. He explained the invention, a mine detection system that saved lives in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Cambodia. He spoke about his regrets, missing time with family, but believing in something bigger. His eyes never left the camera, like he knew we'd be watching one day. Nathan stood silent, arms crossed at first. But the more the message played, the more he leaned in. His grandfather was no failed dreamer. He was a soldier in his own way. One who saved lives from halfway across the world. We opened the crate. Inside was a rugged, compact device. Nathan ran his fingers across it, then carried it to the entrance of the vault. He turned it on, scanned the ground, and a light flashed where we'd walked. The thing still worked. He looked back at me. His eyes were different, softer, maybe even proud. I hadn't seen that look since he was a kid. And for the first time in years, I felt like maybe I wasn't a burden. I was part of something that mattered. We didn't move into a mansion. We didn't buy matching sports cars or private jets. Instead, we signed the lease on a brick building near the VA hospital in Billings and hung a wooden sign that read Colburn Foundation for Veterans. The first thing we did was build a team. Former medics, retired officers, and mental health counselors. Men and women who understood what it felt like to be forgotten. Our mission was simple. Help those who served feel seen again. Nathan took over the digital side. He built a site, ran the campaigns, and created videos that told the stories no one else would. And for the first time, he started introducing me as his dad. Not Jack. Not the guy who drives a beat-up truck. Just Dad. We sat together at a fundraiser one night, watching a mother cry as she thanked us for helping her son get clean. Nathan leaned over and said quietly that Grandpa would have liked this place. I didn't say anything back. I just nodded. My throat was too full. Money helps. I won't lie. It buys beds for shelter, pays off overdue bills, and funds scholarships for vets to go back to school. But the real wealth is in the moments. Like watching Nathan high-five a kid whose father came home from rehab, or hearing my name spoken with pride again. I still wear my old army ring, still drive that same truck. But I feel rich every morning I walk into that building and see the faces of people who believe in what we're doing, who believe in us. And every time I see Nathan leading one of our workshops or fixing the flag out front, I know one thing for sure. Redemption isn't bought, it's built. And we built ours together. One scar, one story, one saved life at a time.